Hi, Todd Ortscheid here with GTL Real Estate, talking about filters this week. HVAC filters for your air conditioning and furnace systems. It's a question we get quite a bit from owners about how they can make sure that the tenants are actually replacing the filters at the house, because a lot of owners understand, rightfully so, that this is a big expense if you don't get these changed. If the filters don't get swapped out, you can end up with a lot of problems with your HVAC system. Creates about a 15% increase in your annual expenses when measured over long periods of time on your repairs on that system. It cuts off a few years of life. About 3 years or so of the life of the unit gets cut off if those filters aren't being regularly changed. So it's a big expense, because obviously this is a pretty expensive system. So it's a big source of additional unnecessary expenses if those filters aren't being changed. So it's important to make sure that the tenants are doing that. Now, our leases have always had this requirement. They've always said that tenants are required to replace the filter every 90 days. But of course, it's pretty much impossible to enforce this, at least in a cost-effective way, without raising your management fee. About the only way we could do that right now would be to send an inspector into every property every 90 days to take a look to see if they've replaced those filters. And that's just cost prohibitive. Nobody would want their management fees to go up to cover that sort of expense. So thankfully, we found another solution. And that's a program called FilterEasy. And you might have seen them on the internet or heard them on the radio. It's a company that basically does a subscription-based filter service. It's basically the Netflix of HVAC filters. So they send a filter on a set schedule out to the house, and it's a custom filter. It's set for the subscription is set for the size of the filter that goes in your unit at your house. And it's even if you have multiple filters. So if you have 4 different units at your house, if you've got a large house, then they'll send 4 filters, each one of them the correct size for that unit, and it'll get sent out to your house on a regular schedule. We've got it set up at 90 days, which is what our leases are set up at. So they just automatically send that out. So the tenant gets that filter. It's a big box that arrives on their front doorstep. It's got our logo on it, so they know that it's from us, even though it's actually being sent from FilterEasy. It's got our logo on it, which is a nice reminder to them that this is a requirement in their lease. They need to swap it out. But just actually getting that filter show up on their doorstep, instead of them having to go out to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy it themselves, is basically what's needed to get them to actually swap it out. FilterEasy has found that about 90% of the filters are getting swapped out on the regular schedule it's supposed to when you actually send the filter to the tenant using their system. So that's a big improvement. Right now it's probably closer to 20%. And we know this because of our on-site pros inspections that happen once a year. Those inspectors are checking those filters, and a large percentage of the time the filter hasn't been changed and we're charging the tenant to replace it. Problem is that inspection only happens once or twice a year, depending on what the owner has selected. So it's not getting checked anywhere near as much as it needs to. So with this program with FilterEasy, the filter will now automatically get sent to the tenant every 90 days. They'll get that reminder to swap it out. And again, according to FilterEasy, about 90% of them are getting swapped out when that is taking place. Now, there's still the backstop of the on-site pros inspection. So the good thing about the FilterEasy filter is when they're doing them for property management companies like us, they're putting a date stamp that the filter expires right on the side of the filter. So when our inspector goes in to look every year, or every 6 months if you've selected that in your management agreement, then he'll look at that expiration date on the side of that filter, and he'll see whether the filter is expired. If it is, that means the tenant hasn't been replacing the filter like they're supposed to, and we're going to have a provision in our in our lease agreements now that charges the tenant basically liquidated damages to make up for the increase in HVAC repair bills that you can expect as a result of them not changing their filter out. So now that we have that expiration date on there, and it's not just an inspector's eye trying to figure out whether the filter's been replaced or not just by looking at the amount of dust in it, now we actually have that date, and it makes it really easy to enforce. the inspector will snap a picture of the date on the side of that filter showing that it was expired, and we can charge that tenant liquidated damages, and that will go to you to help offset any expenses you have for your HVAC repair bills. But again, like I said, this should only happen about 10% of the time, because once the filters get sent to the tenant on a regular basis, they should be swapping them out, and we're pretty confident that's going to happen. Now, you're probably asking, how much is this going to cost me? And the answer is nothing. This is all going to be charged to the tenant. So the tenant is already responsible for replacing their filters anyway. That's already in their existing lease. So as each new lease gets signed for new tenants and for renewals, there'll be a new provision in that lease that says that the tenant is going to pay for this FilterEasy program. It's basically just an administrative fee that gets tacked onto their monthly rent, so that they're basically reimbursing us, the management company, for buying that filter through FilterEasy. And they just get billed that on a monthly basis. Even though the filter only gets sent out every 90 days, it's just easier to do it monthly. So they'll be covering the cost of that filter, just like they're supposed to be doing now, buying it themselves, but now it'll be on a subscription basis and it'll just happen automatically. So we think this is going to be a much better system. It's going to make it far more likely that the filters are going to be replaced, and it should save you about 15% on your HVAC system repair bills, which will be a nice improvement. And best of all, it's at no cost to you. Now, the only exception to that no cost to you part is for the filters that are in locations where the tenant can't get to. So some of you have, and it's very few houses we manage, but there are a few of them where the HVAC system is in a crawl space under the house, or it's in an inaccessible attic where the tenant can't get to from their unit in some multi-unit buildings. In those cases, a solution that FilterEasy has been able to come up with is that we can replace the actual cool air returns inside the house with a special kind of cool air return that actually takes a filter right there at the vent instead of at the actual unit. So we'll be able to make it so the tenant can replace those filters even in those units that they're unable to access. The only downside to this is there is the upfront cost of replacing that vent, that cool air return vent. It's a small cost, basically just service call plus a few dollars for the materials for the new vent. Not an expensive thing, and you'll basically get that savings back real quickly in the reduced HVAC repair bills that you'll pay. But again, this only applies to a small number of units anyway that have crawl spaces or just inaccessible HVAC systems. So not many of you will have to deal with that anyway, but there are a few of you that will have that expense of replacing those vents. So just wanted to let you know about that ahead of time. And that'll only be done at the time of a new tenant being placed or of a lease renewal when they go active with the new FilterEasy system. So every one of the units that we manage will be on this system within the next year. It'll be done as each renewal comes up or as each vacancy happens. So within a year, you should be on this new system. You'll know that your property is being better taken care of, because the tenant will be getting these filters. So we think that'll be a big improvement both for you and for the convenience of the tenant, since they won't have to go out and buy these filters anymore or worry about getting charged for not replacing them. So all around, it's a win-win for everybody. We think it's a good system. We've spoken to a lot of other property management companies in other states that have implemented this. They've all been very happy with it, and they say their clients and their tenants have also been very happy with it. So we think it should be a good system for everybody. If you have any questions about it, please send us an email at support@gtlrealestate.com, and we'll be happy to answer any of those questions. And we'll talk to you next time.